Dawn breaks over Dubai's Burj Al Arab, casting golden light across a wedding suite that cost more per night than most people earn in a year. But inside this temple of luxury, where silk sheets are changed 3 times daily and champagne flows like water, Sheikh Khalid al-Zahrani stands frozen in his designer kandjara, staring at a piece of paper that has just shattered his entire world. A DNA test report, simple white paper with blue letterhead. But the words printed there in clinical precision have transformed his $5 million wedding into the most expensive mistake of his life. His bride, the woman he married just 72 hours ago after paying the highest dowry in Dubai's recent history, the Filipina virgin whose purity had been verified by 3 separate medical examinations, is carrying a secret that will turn celebration into bloodbath. Her name is Isabella Santos, or at least that's what her passport says. In the marble bathroom behind him, she's sobbing, pleading, trying to explain something that has no explanation in the world Sheikh Khalid inhabits. A world where honor is currency, where bloodlines determine billions, and where deception at this level demands the kind of payment that can never be refunded. But here's what the headlines will never tell you. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was the inevitable explosion when 2 desperate worlds collide. When poverty weaponizes beauty and wealth weaponizes everything else. When a woman's body becomes a contract and a man's honor becomes a death sentence. Stay with us, because this story will destroy everything you think you know about love, money, and the terrifying price of secrets in a city built on illusions. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button now, because we're about to take you inside the darkest corners of Dubai's elite marriage market, where human beings are traded like commodities and truth is the most dangerous luxury of all. Isabella Santos was born on August 3, 1999, in Tondo, Manila's most notorious slum, where tin-roofed shanties lean against each other like exhausted refugees, and raw sewage flows through streets that flood with every storm. Her mother, Carmen, sold vegetables from a wooden cart that represented the family's only asset. Her father, Roberto, had disappeared when Isabella was 3, leaving behind only debts and a faded photograph that her mother kept hidden in a Bible that had more missing pages than intact ones. Tondo isn't just poverty. It's poverty with eyes that watch you constantly, calculating what you might be worth. By the time Isabella was 12, those eyes had already assessed her value. She was beautiful in a way that transcended her circumstances. Long black hair that caught light like silk despite being washed with cheap soap. Eyes the color of dark honey that seemed to hold depths her age shouldn't possess. Cheekbones that suggested aristocratic lineage her family history couldn't support. "You could model," the neighbors would tell Carmen, watching Isabella walk to the communal water pump. "You should take her to those agencies in Makati. That face could change your life." But Carmen knew what those agencies really were. She'd seen too many beautiful girls from Tondo return with empty eyes and full wallets, their beauty transformed into transactions they couldn't speak about. So she made Isabella promise. "Study hard, keep your virtue, don't let this place define you." Isabella kept the first 2 promises. She was valedictorian at her public high school despite studying by candlelight when the electricity was cut, which was often. She graduated from a nursing program at Philippine Women's University on a scholarship she earned by working weekends at a local clinic, cleaning floors and organizing supplies while absorbing everything the nurses taught her. But the 3rd promise, about not letting Tondo define her, was impossible to keep, because Tondo defined everything. It defined the constant hunger that made concentration during exams feel like swimming through mud. It defined the shame of wearing the same worn uniform while wealthier students showed up in pristine versions. It defined the mathematical equation that every poor Filipino understood. Beauty plus desperation equals opportunity if you're willing to pay the price. Then came the diagnosis that transformed Isabella's calculation from abstract to urgent. Her mother's persistent cough that she'd blamed on Manila's polluted air was actually stage 3 lung cancer. The oncologist at Philippine General Hospital was blunt. 6 months without treatment, maybe 18 months with aggressive chemotherapy. The cost will be approximately 2 million pesos. Isabella did the math instantly. 2 million pesos was roughly $35,000 USD. Her salary as a newly licensed nurse at a Manila hospital was 15,000 pesos monthly, about $270. Even if she didn't eat, didn't pay rent, didn't exist at all beyond her labor, she couldn't save fast enough to save her mother's life. That's when the advertisement appeared on her Facebook feed, targeted with algorithmic precision at desperate young nurses in developing nations. Elite International Marriage Agency, seeking educated Filipino women for culturally sensitive matches with successful Middle Eastern professionals, legitimate arrangements, verified families, life-changing compensation. The photo showed a handsome Arab man in traditional dress standing beside a modest-looking Filipino woman in elegant attire, both smiling in what appeared to be genuine happiness. The testimonials from previous brides spoke of respectful husbands, beautiful homes, and financial security that allowed them to support entire extended families back home. What the advertisement didn't show were the women who never came home, the ones whose testimonials were written by agency copywriters, the ones whose beautiful homes became beautiful prisons. But desperation has a way of making invisible things you might otherwise see clearly. Isabella clicked the link. Golden Crescent Bridal occupied the 14th floor of a gleaming office tower in Makati, Manila's business district. The reception area featured orchids that cost more than Isabella's monthly salary, and the receptionist wore a designer suit that suggested this was an operation with serious capital behind it. "You're even more beautiful in person," the intake coordinator said, studying Isabella with the practiced assessment of someone who evaluated human merchandise for a living. "But beauty isn't enough. Our clients expect intelligence, cultural adaptability, and most importantly, verified purity." The phrase verified purity should have triggered alarm bells. But Isabella was thinking about her mother's rasping breath, about the X-rays showing shadows in lungs that had once sung lullabies. She nodded. The process began with psychological evaluations designed to assess compliance rather than compatibility. They asked questions that had no right answers, only revealing ones. How important is personal freedom compared to family security? Would you prioritize your husband's wishes over your own comfort? Do you believe a woman's primary duty is to her family or herself? Isabella had been raised Catholic in a culture that valued female submission as virtue. She answered honestly, not realizing she was providing a roadmap for her own exploitation. Then came the medical examinations, not just standard health screenings, but invasive procedures that documented every aspect of her physical condition. They photographed her naked body from every angle, measured proportions with tailor's precision, and most invasively, verified her virginity through examinations that felt more like violations. "This is necessary," the clinic doctor explained, her voice professionally detached. "Our clients pay premium prices for verified brides. They need documentation that will withstand scrutiny." The documentation was extensive. Medical certificates stamped by 3 different physicians, ultrasound images, blood tests showing hormonal profiles consistent with someone who had never been pregnant, even a notarized affidavit from Isabella herself, swearing under penalty of perjury that she had never engaged in sexual relations. What Isabella didn't know was that her signed documents included clauses in fine print that would haunt her. Clauses about misrepresentation penalties. Clauses about agency ownership of her image and information. Clauses that essentially made her agency property until a contract was fulfilled. The cultural training lasted 3 months. She learned to speak basic Arabic, to prepare traditional Middle Eastern dishes, to walk with the posture expected of elite wives. They taught her how to lower her gaze appropriately, how to respond to male authority with proper deference, how to exist in luxury while maintaining the servitude her future role would require. "You're being groomed for something special," her instructor told her during one particularly grueling etiquette session. "The clients we're considering you for are extremely wealthy, billionaire class. Your life will be transformed beyond anything you can imagine. The transformation had already begun, though not in ways Isabella understood. She was being systematically disconnected from her old identity, prepared for a new existence where her value would be determined entirely by her ability to fulfill contract obligations. She was becoming a product, carefully packaged and marketed to men who bought human beings the way others bought luxury cars. When the match was announced, Isabella was told only the essentials. Her husband would be Sheikh Khalid al-Zahrani, aged 38, heir to a real estate empire in Dubai. The dowry would be $5 million, the highest Golden Crescent had ever arranged. $3 million would go to Isabella's family immediately, with the remaining $2 million held in trust pending successful consummation and first-year marriage compliance. "He's perfect for you," the coordinator assured her, showing photographs of a handsome man in traditional dress standing before Dubai's glittering skyline. Educated in London, modern in his thinking but traditional in his values. He specifically requested a nurse because his elderly mother requires regular care. Your professional skills make you ideal. What they didn't mention was that Sheikh Khalid had already been through 2 failed marriages. That his first wife had fled back to her family after 8 months, signing massive non-disclosure agreements that prevented her from speaking about what happened behind closed doors. That his second wife had requested divorce after less than a year, forfeiting her entire dowry to escape the marriage. What they definitely didn't mention was the dark secret hiding in Isabella's own past. A secret even she didn't fully understand yet. A secret that would transform a wedding suite into a crime scene. Sheikh Khalid al-Zahrani had been raised in a world where power was inherited, responsibility was absolute, and failure was unacceptable. His father, Sheikh Mohammed al-Zahrani, controlled real estate holdings across 3 continents, employing over 12,000 people, and had built a dynasty that expected perpetuation through legitimate male heirs. Khalid's childhood had been filled with private tutors, luxury vacations, and constant reminders of his obligations to family honor. "You are not just yourself," his father would say during their formal weekly meetings. "You are the embodiment of 4 generations. Every choice you make reflects on everyone who came before and everyone who will come after." At 38, Khalid had delivered on most expectations. His MBA from London School of Economics, his expansion of the family's Dubai property portfolio by 40%, his charitable foundation that funded schools and hospitals across the Middle East. But the one expectation he couldn't fulfill haunted him like a curse. He couldn't produce an heir. 2 marriages had failed for the same reason. His first wife, a cousin from another prominent family, had become pregnant twice, miscarrying both times before the 3rd month. Medical examinations had been inconclusive, suggesting possible genetic incompatibility rather than specific fertility issues with either partner. But in Khalid's world, medical explanations mattered less than practical results. His second marriage, to a woman from a rival business family, had been even more disastrous. She'd been beautiful, educated, and appropriately submissive during courtship. But after 6 months of failed conception attempts, she'd confessed something that shattered Khalid's trust completely. She'd had a previous relationship, undisclosed during marriage negotiations, and had secretly taken birth control to delay pregnancy until she felt more emotionally ready. The deception had enraged Khalid beyond reason. The marriage had been built on verified virginity, documented purity, and the promise of uncomplicated conception. To discover she'd been sexually active before their marriage and was actively preventing pregnancy felt like double betrayal. The divorce had been swift and brutal, with his legal team ensuring she received nothing beyond basic Islamic requirements. Now approaching 40 with no children and growing pressure from his family council, Khalid had made a decision that seemed radical but was actually calculated. He would seek a wife from outside traditional channels, someone from a developing nation whose gratitude would ensure loyalty, someone whose poverty would make the wealth he offered seem like divine blessing, someone whose verified virginity would be guaranteed through the most rigorous screening available. Golden Crescent Bridal had been recommended by a business associate who had successfully married a Filipino nurse 2 years earlier. "They're thorough," his friend had assured him. "Medical verification, psychological screening, cultural training. By the time the bride arrives, she's been transformed into exactly what you need." When Khalid reviewed Isabella's file, he'd been immediately impressed. Nursing degree from a reputable university. No history of relationships or romantic involvement. Medical verification from 3 separate physicians confirming her virgin status. Psychological assessments showing high compliance scores and low autonomy preferences. Family background showing poverty desperate enough to ensure she'd never risk losing her position through disobedience. But there was something else in her photographs that caught his attention. Beneath the obvious beauty was a sadness in her eyes that suggested depth, vulnerability, perhaps even genuine sweetness rather than calculated seduction. He'd grown tired of women who saw him only as a wealth opportunity. Isabella's file suggested someone who might actually appreciate rescue from her circumstances. What Khalid didn't know was that even the most thorough verification can miss secrets that hide in blood and genes. Secrets that medical examinations can't detect because they're looking for the wrong things. Secrets that would soon explode his carefully constructed world with the force of a bomb hidden in a wedding cake. The wedding was scheduled for March 15th at the Burj Al Arab, with 800 guests including government ministers, international business partners, and 3 members of the UAE royal family. The $5 million dowry was prepared in certified bank transfers. The marriage contract was drafted by Dubai's most expensive legal team, with specific clauses about heir production, behavioral expectations, and penalties for any form of deception. Everything was perfect, everything was controlled, everything was about to go catastrophically wrong. Isabella arrived in Dubai on March 10th, 5 days before her wedding, accompanied by 2 Golden Crescent representatives who would ensure she fulfilled her contractual obligations. She'd said goodbye to her mother in a Manila hospital room, promising through tears that the money from this marriage would save her life. "You're doing the right thing," Carmen had whispered, her voice weakened by cancer but strong with certainty. "Sometimes God tests us by asking us to sacrifice our dreams for those we love. You're my miracle, Isabella." The guilt Isabella felt in that moment was crushing, because she was keeping a secret even from her dying mother. A secret she discovered only 3 weeks before, hidden in medical records from a blood test required by the marriage agency. Dubai overwhelmed her senses immediately. The airport was larger and more luxurious than any building she'd ever entered. The car that picked her up was a Rolls-Royce with leather seats softer than any bed she'd slept in. The hotel where she was housed during final preparations was a 40-story monument to excess, where even the bathroom fixtures appeared to be gold-plated. But beneath the luxury, Isabella felt increasingly trapped. Her passport had been held for safekeeping by the agency representatives. Her phone had been replaced with one that had restricted internet access and monitored communications. Her movements were always accompanied by handlers who called themselves wedding coordinators, but felt more like guards. The final preparations were exhausting and invasive. More medical examinations to confirm her condition hadn't changed during travel. Extensive grooming sessions that transformed her natural beauty into something more artificial and acceptable to conservative sensibilities. Cultural briefings that became increasingly specific about her expected behavior. Sheikh Khalid values submissiveness above all, her handler explained during one such session. "Do not speak unless addressed. Do not make eye contact with male guests. Do not question any decision he makes, especially regarding your duties as a wife." The wedding dress arrived 2 days before the ceremony, a creation worth more than her family's shanty in Tondo. But as Isabella stood before the mirror in silk and diamonds, she saw not a bride but a beautifully wrapped product being prepared for delivery. She'd been awake for 36 hours, rehearsing responses to questions she might be asked. memorizing details about Sheikh Khalid's family that she needed to demonstrate knowledge of, and silently repeating the lie she decided to maintain until she could figure out how to escape the truth she was hiding. Because Isabella Santos was carrying a secret that made her marriage contract fraudulent from the moment she'd signed it. A secret that was already growing inside her, invisible to everyone but impossible to hide forever. She was pregnant, not from any relationship or romance, not from the kind of situation that would make the deception understandable, if not forgivable. Isabella's pregnancy was the result of something far more complicated and far more dangerous to reveal. 6 months earlier, desperate for additional income to help her mother, Isabella had participated in a medical research study at a Manila fertility clinic. The study was testing new IVF procedures, and healthy young women were being paid to serve as gestational carriers for embryo development research. She'd been assured the embryos would be terminated after the research period, that this was purely scientific, that there was no risk of actual pregnancy. But something had gone wrong, or perhaps something had gone exactly as planned, depending on which conspiracy theory you believed about fertility clinics in developing nations. One embryo had implanted successfully, and by the time Isabella discovered she was pregnant, the clinic had closed its Manila operations, its staff disappeared, and its records mysteriously destroyed in a fire that investigators deemed suspicious but unsolved. Isabella had terminated the pregnancy immediately, or so she thought. The abortion clinic she'd gone to, a back alley operation in Tondo she could actually afford, had assured her the procedure was complete. But the medical tests required by Golden Crescent had revealed something terrifying. She was still pregnant, approximately 14 weeks, the fetus somehow surviving the attempted termination. By then, her mother's cancer treatment had already begun, funded by the advance payment from Isabella's marriage contract. Backing out would mean her mother's death and her family's financial destruction. The agency had made clear that breach of contract would result in penalties that would bankrupt them for generations. So Isabella had made a desperate gamble. The pregnancy was still early enough that physical signs weren't obvious, especially under the elaborate wedding dress. She would go through with the marriage, then claim the pregnancy was a result of the wedding night consummation. Sheikh Khalid would never know the child wasn't conceived during their union. By the time any questions arose, she would be legally married with protections that would make it harder for him to simply discard her. It was a plan built on desperate hope and fundamental misunderstanding of how thoroughly wealthy men protect their legacies. The wedding itself was a spectacle that would be featured in Dubai society magazines for months afterward. 800 guests bearing witness to the union of Sheikh Khalid al-Zahrani and his beautiful Filipino bride. 20-foot floral arrangements imported from Colombia. An orchestra flown in from Vienna. A fireworks display that lit up the Dubai Marina skyline. Isabella moved through it all in a daze of terror and exhaustion, her smile fixed like a mask, her responses to well-wishers automated by 3 months of training. Sheikh Khalid was attentive and seemingly pleased, his hand on her lower back suggesting possession rather than affection, but not unkind in his public demeanor. The ceremony was conducted in both Arabic and English, with Islamic and Catholic elements carefully negotiated through months of interfaith coordination. When Sheikh Khalid placed the ring on her finger, his eyes held something Isabella couldn't quite read. Pride of acquisition, genuine hope, or just relief that his duty was being fulfilled. The celebration lasted 7 hours, ending near midnight as guests departed with elaborate gift bags and invitations to future gatherings at the Sheikh's various properties. Isabella's feet ached in her designer heels. Her face hurt from smiling. Her secret felt like a bomb ticking inside her body. The wedding suite Sheikh Khalid had reserved occupied the entire top floor of the Burj Al Arab. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Dubai's glittering sprawl. A bedroom larger than the house Isabella had grown up in, and most ominously, complete privacy. No staff, no witnesses, no escape. "You must be exhausted," Sheikh Khalid said, his voice gentle as he removed his ceremonial headdress. "This has been an overwhelming day." Isabella nodded, fear and fatigue making speech difficult. The moment she'd been dreading was approaching. The consummation that would seal the contract and trigger the final dowry payments. The moment when her deception would either succeed or destroy everything. But Sheikh Khalid surprised her. "We don't have to consummate tonight," he said, pouring sparkling water into crystal glasses. "I know this has all been rushed. I want you to feel comfortable." The kindness was unexpected and somehow made everything worse. Isabella felt tears threatening and forced them back. If he only knew that his gentleness was coming moments before her deception would be exposed. They sat on the suite's sprawling balcony, Dubai's lights spreading below them like a field of stars. Sheikh Khalid talked about his hopes for their marriage, his desire for children, his vision of building a partnership based on mutual respect despite their cultural differences. "I know you've heard rumors about my previous marriages," he admitted. "Both failed because of dishonesty. My first wife hid medical issues that affected her ability to carry children. My second wife concealed her sexual history. In both cases, the deception destroyed any possibility of trust." Isabella's blood ran cold. This was worse than she'd imagined. He wasn't just concerned about purity as an abstract concept. He'd been burned by deception before and was hypervigilant about anything that might represent betrayal. "That's why I chose you," he continued, taking her hand. "The agency assured me you've been thoroughly vetted. Your medical records are pristine. Your background investigation revealed no romantic history. Your family reputation, while humble, is solid. You represent exactly what I need: honesty, purity, and the possibility of building something real." The irony was suffocating. Isabella was the ultimate betrayal wrapped in a wedding dress. 2 days into their marriage, Sheikh Khalid suggested they undergo fertility testing. "Not because I suspect any problems," he explained, "but because my family has a history of genetic conditions that can affect successful conception. It's standard practice in my family. We test both partners to ensure the best possible outcomes." The testing would include genetic screening, hormonal panels, and most devastatingly, pregnancy tests. Isabella's secret would be exposed within hours of submitting blood samples. She considered running, simply disappearing into Dubai's urban sprawl and trying to lose herself among the millions of expatriate workers. But she had no passport, no money, no Arabic, and no knowledge of how to navigate a city where women like her were routinely detained for violating visa conditions. She considered confessing, throwing herself on Sheikh Khalid's mercy and hoping his apparent kindness extended to forgiveness for desperate circumstances. But his words about his previous wives' deceptions made clear that betrayal was unforgivable regardless of motivation. She considered lying about the pregnancy, claiming it must have happened during their wedding night despite the impossible timeline. But the tests would date the pregnancy's age, revealing her deception instantly. So Isabella did the only thing she could think of. She tried to delay. She complained of feeling unwell from the wedding excitement. She suggested postponing testing until they'd had time to settle into married life naturally. She tried every evasion she could construct. But Sheikh Khalid, perhaps sensing something off in her behavior, became insistent. "I've scheduled the appointments," he said on their 4th day of marriage. "We'll go together tomorrow morning. It's really nothing to worry about." That night, Isabella barely slept. She lay in the massive bed beside a man whose life she was about to destroy, knowing that by this time tomorrow, everything would have exploded. The fertility clinic was the most advanced in Dubai, with equipment and specialists that made the Manila facilities Isabella knew seem like medieval medicine. The procedures were quick and professional. Blood drawn, samples collected, forms filled out with lies that would be exposed by laboratory precision. "Results will be available tomorrow afternoon," the specialist told them cheerfully. "We'll call as soon as the panel is complete." Sheikh Khalid took Isabella to lunch at a restaurant overlooking the Persian Gulf. He talked about taking her to London, introducing her to the properties his family owned, showing her the world beyond Dubai. His enthusiasm was genuine, his planning for their future already detailed and elaborate. Isabella could barely eat. Every minute felt like falling, waiting for the inevitable impact. The call came at 3:47 p.m. the following day. Sheikh Khalid answered, his expression shifting from pleasant anticipation to confusion to something much darker. He listened in silence for nearly 2 minutes, his jaw tightening with each passing second. When he ended the call, he turned to Isabella with eyes that had transformed from warm to arctic. "You're pregnant," he said, his voice stripped of all emotion. 14 weeks pregnant. Isabella opened her mouth, but no words came out. The moment she'd been dreading had arrived, and she discovered she'd prepared no defense. "But that's impossible based on our marriage timeline," Sheikh Khalid continued, his voice becoming quieter and more dangerous. "Which means you were pregnant when you married me, which means every medical certificate the agency provided was fraudulent, which means you've made me the greatest fool in Dubai." "I can explain," Isabella began, but Sheikh Khalid held up his hand. "I don't want explanations," he said. "I want a DNA test immediately." The demand confused her. "A DNA test, but we've only been married 5 days." "To determine the father of the child you're carrying," he interrupted. "Because I need to know whether you were simply pregnant when you arrived, or whether you've been sexually active since coming to Dubai, possibly with multiple partners." The accusation was so far from the truth that Isabella almost laughed, but the situation had moved beyond anything resembling humor. Within hours, additional tests had been ordered. Advanced genetic screening that would determine not just paternity but genetic characteristics of the developing fetus. Sheikh Khalid's family doctor, a man who had known him since childhood, handled everything with discretion that Isabella recognized as preparation for damage control. The results that came back 3 days later transformed confusion into nightmare. The DNA analysis revealed something no one had anticipated. The fetus Isabella carried was genetically related to Sheikh Khalid's family line, not to Khalid himself, but to his bloodline. The probability analysis suggested a relationship consistent with the child being Khalid's niece or nephew. Which was impossible. Isabella had never met any member of the Al-Zahrani family before her wedding. She'd never been to Dubai before 3 weeks ago. She'd never had sexual contact with anyone in her entire life. But the DNA didn't lie. Somehow, impossibly, Isabella was carrying a child that shared genetic markers with the Al-Zahrani dynasty. The only explanation that fit the facts was the one Isabella had tried desperately to suppress: the fertility clinic in Manila, the embryo implantation research, the study that had promised to terminate all research embryos but had instead allowed one to develop. "Tell me everything," Sheikh Khalid demanded, his rage now mixed with a confusion that suggested he was questioning his own sanity. "Every detail of how you became pregnant with a child genetically related to my family." And so Isabella told him about her mother's cancer, about the fertility research study, about the clinic that had closed suspiciously, about the abortion that had failed, about the desperate gamble she'd made to save her mother's life. "The embryo," Sheikh Khalid said slowly, his mind working through implications that grew darker with each connection. "Where did it come from?" Isabella had no answer, but Sheikh Khalid did, and as he made phone calls to investigate, the truth emerged like a plague from a forgotten grave. The Manila Fertility Clinic had been a front operation for an international genetic material trafficking network. They'd been harvesting eggs and sperm from donors around the world, sometimes consensually, often through deception or outright theft. They'd been creating embryos and selling them to the highest bidders, or using them in unauthorized research, or implanting them in unknowing carriers for purposes that ranged from unethical medical studies to something far more sinister. One of their donors had been Sheikh Khalid's younger brother, Fahad, who had visited a fertility clinic in London 5 years earlier to bank sperm before undergoing cancer treatment. His genetic material had supposedly been destroyed after his death from that cancer 3 years ago. But it hadn't been destroyed. It had been stolen, sold, and used to create embryos that were scattered across the globe in an underground fertility market that traded in genetic legacies, the way others traded stocks and bonds. Isabella was pregnant with Sheikh Khalid's nephew, a child that was technically a member of the al-Zahrani bloodline, but conceived through a chain of theft, deception, and exploitation that made its very existence an abomination in Sheikh Khalid's eyes. "You're carrying my dead brother's child," Sheikh Khalid whispered, his voice hollow with horror. "A child created without his consent, implanted into you without your knowledge, part of a scheme so perverse I can barely comprehend it." "I didn't know," Isabella sobbed. "I swear I didn't know. I thought it was just research. I needed the money for my mother." "Your mother is dead," Sheikh Khalid interrupted. The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. "What?" "I received word an hour ago. The cancer treatment failed. She died this morning in Manila." Isabella's scream echoed through the palatial suite, a sound of such pure anguish that hotel staff on lower floors would later report hearing it through supposedly soundproof construction. She collapsed to the floor, her body convulsing with grief that transcended the immediate moment to encompass everything. Her mother's death, her own deception, the impossible horror of carrying a stolen child from a dead man's stolen seed. Sheikh Khalid watched her breakdown with an expression that contained no sympathy. In his mind, Isabella had become something beyond human, a walking violation of everything he held sacred: family honor, genetic legacy, the sanctity of bloodlines carefully maintained across generations. "The pregnancy must be terminated," he said flatly. "The child's existence is an affront to my brother's memory and my family's honor." "No," Isabella said through tears, her hands moving protectively over her still flat stomach. "This child is innocent. Whatever happened, whatever corruption brought it into existence, the child itself has done nothing wrong." "The child is a crime," Sheikh Khalid replied. "Its very existence is evidence of theft and violation, and you are complicit in that crime whether you knew it or not." "I won't terminate," Isabella said, her voice finding strength from some reserve she didn't know she possessed. "I'll leave. I'll go back to Manila. You can divorce me, take back the dowry, pretend this marriage never happened, but I won't destroy an innocent life." It was the wrong thing to say, or perhaps it was the only thing she could say. But those words transformed Sheikh Khalid's cold fury into something far more dangerous. "You think you can dictate terms?" he asked, moving toward her with steps that seemed too calm, too measured. "You think you have rights in this situation? You've committed fraud that makes me a laughingstock. You're carrying genetic material stolen from my dead brother, and now you refuse to correct any of this." "I'm sorry," Isabella whispered, backing away. "I'm so sorry for everything, but please just let me leave." "Leave?" Sheikh Khalid's laugh was bitter. "Leave and go where? You have no money, no passport, no family. Your mother is dead. Your home is gone. The entire reason for your deception no longer exists." "I'll find a way." "There is no way," he interrupted. "There is only justice, and in my world, justice is measured in blood." The attack came so suddenly that Isabella had no time to defend herself. Sheikh Khalid's hands closed around her throat, rage and betrayal and accumulated humiliation pouring through his fingers with crushing force. In those final moments, as consciousness began to fade, Isabella's last coherent thoughts were of the child she carried, the innocent victim of a scheme neither of them had chosen, the genetic legacy of a dead man carried by a woman who'd only wanted to save her mother. Two lives about to end because systems of exploitation had collided with systems of honor, with human beings crushed in between. The bloodbath that followed wasn't passionate or chaotic. It was methodical. The work of a man ensuring that evidence of his humiliation would never survive to testify against him. When it was over, Sheikh Khalid al-Zahrani stood in his wedding suite, surrounded by luxury that now felt like mockery, staring at what he had done. The $5 million bride lay dead on Italian marble. The child carrying his brother's stolen genetic legacy would never be born. The honor he'd tried so desperately to protect had been destroyed by his own hands. He called his family's crisis management team. By dawn, Isabella Santos would be just another domestic worker who died in an unfortunate accident. Another statistic in a system designed to make certain lives disposable. The DNA test that had revealed the truth sat on the suite's desk, its clinical language describing a reality too horrifying for anyone to believe. It would be destroyed along with every other piece of evidence, and the truth would be buried as deeply as the bodies. In Dubai's glittering towers, where wealth creates its own reality and justice serves those who can afford it, another beautiful bride had disappeared into silence. Another family somewhere would receive news of accidental death. Another crime would vanish into the machinery of power and money. The $5 million wedding had ended exactly as it had begun, with lies bought and sold as truth, with human lives treated as contracts, with blood spilled over honor that had never existed in the first place. But deep in the night, in the darkest hours before dawn, even Sheikh Khalid al-Zahrani wept. Not for Isabella, not for the child that would never be born, but for the brother whose genetic material had been violated even in death, for the family honor that had been corrupted beyond any cleaning, for the man he'd become in trying to protect something that was already lost. In the end, the bloodbath claimed 3 victims: the woman who died trying to save her mother, the child who'd never had a chance to choose its own existence, and the man who discovered that some stains run too deep for even $5 million to wash away.